Welcome, dear listeners. Today, I bring you a story that chills the heart, a dark chapter of American history that remained hidden for years. It is the haunting, tragic tale of the Radium Girls. The 1920s in America, a time of industrial revolution, rapid progress, and hope. After World War I, factories flourished, new inventions appeared every day, and jobs became the symbol of opportunity. For women, especially, this was a new dawn. They had stepped into workplaces and factories, proving their strength in a man's world. Among the booming industries was one that produced glow-in-the-dark paint, a substance used on watch dials, military instruments, and scientific tools. Its magic ingredient was radium. Discovered by Marie Curie, radium was considered a miracle element. Doctors recommended it as a cure. Companies added it to medicines, cosmetics, even toothpaste. People believed radium brought life, health, and energy. No one suspected that this glowing dust carried death within it. In New Jersey, the United States Radium Corporation opened a factory where hundreds of women were hired to paint watch dials with radium paint. Their task was delicate, painting tiny numbers and clock hands so soldiers could read them in the dark. The supervisors instructed the women to keep their paintbrushes sharp using their lips, a technique called lip pointing. Every time they shaped the brush with their mouths, they swallowed a tiny amount of radium. At first, the job felt like heaven. The pay was good, the work seemed light, and the glow of radium gave the girls a strange kind of pride. When they left work at night, their dresses, hands, and even their hair glowed faintly in the dark. Neighbors marveled, they shine like stars. The girls themselves laughed, enjoying their glittering appearance. To them, it felt like magic. But that magical glow was the first knock of death. Soon, strange illnesses began spreading among the workers. Teeth loosened, gums bled, jaws ached. Some girls felt unbearable pain in their bones. Doctors were puzzled, yet the company assured everyone that radium was harmless. One of the first victims was a young woman named Molly Maggia. She was full of life and joy, but within months, her health collapsed. Her teeth fell out one by one. When her dentist examined her jaw, it crumbled in his hand. Imagine the horror. Her body was decaying from the inside. In 1922, Molly died in agony at just 24 years old. Her death should have been a warning. But instead, the company dismissed it as coincidence. More women fell ill. Their legs weakened, their bones shattered, cancers spread. Some couldn't walk, some could barely breathe. Yet, they suffered in silence. The question grew louder, was this all mere coincidence? Or was the magical glow of radium secretly spreading death? As the 1920s progressed, more and more women fell ill. Their jaws rotted, their bones shattered, and their once bright faces grew pale with agony. Doctors struggled to explain the mysterious disease. At first, some claimed it was syphilis, a scandalous disease at the time. This lie brought shame upon the victims, making them hesitant to speak up. The company spread such rumors intentionally, trying to hide the truth and protect its profits. But the truth has a way of breaking through. One woman, Grace Fryer, emerged as a central figure in the fight for justice. Grace worked at the radium factory from 1917 to 1920. She was a cheerful young woman who loved her job. But by 1922, her spine began to collapse. She could hardly sit or walk without pain. Doctors eventually told her the unthinkable: her bones were disintegrating, eaten alive from the inside. Grace soon discovered that she was not alone. Many of her fellow workers suffered the same fate. They gathered quietly, whispering about their illnesses. Each story sounded the same: the glowing paint, the lip pointing, the toothaches, the cancers. It became clear, the paint was killing them. Yet, the company refused to accept responsibility. Officials at the United States Radium Corporation insisted that the paint was safe. They hired their own doctors who published reports claiming radium was harmless. They even bribed some scientists to produce false evidence. All the while, young women continued to die. By the mid-1920s, newspapers began to take notice. Headlines whispered of "the living dead girls," describing workers whose bones crumbled and whose bodies glowed faintly in the dark. Society was shocked, but many still didn't believe such horror could be real. How could a substance hailed as miraculous be so deadly? Grace Fryer decided that silence was no longer an option. In 1927, after years of searching, she finally found a lawyer willing to take her case. His name was Raymond Barry, a young attorney with courage to stand against a powerful corporation. Grace, along with 4 other women, Catherine Schaub, Edna Hussman, Quinta MacDonald, and Albina Larice, became known as the Radium Girls. But justice was not easy. The women were weak, dying slowly, their bodies frail. Courtrooms became battlefields where they had to fight not just the company, but time itself. Each day, their health worsened. Grace could barely walk, others were carried into the courtroom on stretchers. The company's lawyers used every trick to delay the trial, hoping the women would die before their case could be heard. Reporters described the women as ghost-like, their skin pale, their jaws bandaged, their movements painful. And yet, their spirits burned with determination. Even after their legal victory, the Radium Girls' suffering did not end. Yes, they had won compensation, but money could not heal their decaying bones. One by one, the women continued to die, their bodies collapsing under the invisible poison they had swallowed years earlier. But now their story was no longer silent. Newspapers wrote about them. Radio shows discussed them. Across America, the name Radium Girls began to echo. The tragedy wasn't limited to New Jersey. In Ottawa, Illinois, another dial painting factory was operating, with dozens of women repeating the same deadly ritual, pointing their paintbrushes with their lips, dipping them into glowing radium, and creating shining watch dials for soldiers and civilians alike. Just like in New Jersey, the girls thought the glow was harmless, even magical. Their bodies sparkled in the dark. Their laughter filled the workshops. Yet inside their bones, death was silently taking root. By the late 1920s and early 1930s, women in Ottawa too began falling mysteriously ill. Their teeth loosened. Their jaws crumbled. Their bones broke without cause. Some were diagnosed with strange, rare cancers. But once again, the company denied responsibility. This has nothing to do with our paint, they claimed. These are ordinary illnesses. But times had changed. The battle in New Jersey had already opened people's eyes. The sacrifices of Grace Fryer and her friends had already proven that radium was no miracle, but a curse. The women of Illinois were not alone anymore. Meanwhile, scientists intensified their research. Doctors like Harrison Martland published groundbreaking studies. They discovered how radium, once inside the body, behaved like calcium. It settled deep within the bones, fusing itself into the very skeleton. But unlike calcium, which gave life and strength, radium poisoned from within. It shattered cells, destroyed tissues, and turned living bodies into walking coffins. These scientific truths gave the Radium Girls their most powerful weapon, undeniable evidence. Their stories were no longer just tales of suffering, they were backed by hard science. Armed with this, the women of Ottawa filed their own lawsuit. This time, the world was watching. The press gave them coverage. Labor unions stood by them. Politicians began to raise questions. Public opinion was shifting rapidly, and the once invincible companies were now facing a storm. The courtroom battles in Illinois were no easier than before. Lawyers for the corporations tried every tactic: delay, denial, discrediting the women. But the sight of these young women, their faces pale, their jaws wrapped in bandages, their bodies broken, moved the conscience of the nation. By the mid-1930s, the truth could no longer be buried. The courts declared the companies guilty. Once again, settlements were awarded. This second great legal battle sealed the fate of the industry. But more importantly, it reshaped America itself. For the first time, the U.S. government recognized that workers had a right to health and safety in their workplaces. Out of the blood and bones of the Radium Girls came modern labor laws and workplace safety regulations. No longer could corporations hide behind lies while their workers suffered in silence. These women could not save their own lives, but they became shields for future generations. Their sacrifice laid the foundation for the protection of millions of workers across America. The courtroom battle had shaken the nation. Newspapers across America carried the haunting images of the young women, their bones decaying, their jaws collapsing, and their spirits fighting for justice. The public could no longer ignore the cries of the Radium Girls. They were not just victims, they had become symbols of courage against greed. As the trial moved forward, doctors and scientists provided undeniable evidence: radium was killing these women from the inside out. Their bones glowed under X-rays, their blood carried the poison, and their bodies were literally disintegrating while they still lived. For the first time, the lies of the powerful companies were torn apart in front of the world. The defense tried everything: delays, bribes, even character attacks on the women, but the truth was too powerful to silence. Journalists named them the living dead, and the world wept at their suffering. Yet, despite the pain, the Radium Girls stood strong in the witness box. Their voices shook, but their courage was unbreakable. By 1938, after years of struggle, a landmark ruling declared that workers had the right to sue companies for damages caused by occupational diseases. This was revolutionary. It wasn't just a victory for the Radium Girls, it was a victory for every worker in America. The story spread globally, changing workplace safety laws forever. Masks, protective gear, health inspections, and legal protections became mandatory in industries where dangerous chemicals were used. The Radium Girls, though broken in body, had given the world a gift of life-saving change. But the tragedy remained. Many of the women didn't live to see the changes they had fought for. Their sacrifice was etched into history, glowing brighter than the deadly paint that had destroyed them. The Radium Girls' story was no longer about death, it had become a story of justice, courage, and a legacy that would never fade.